I am Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Soucy.
And we're paranormal specialists who live in the most haunted city on earth, Savannah, Georgia. Every day is Halloween in our line of work, so join us as we spin true tales of haunts, murders, and disturbing Savannah history. I'm Madison.
I'm Chris.
And welcome to the most haunted city on earth. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the most haunted city on earth. My name is Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Soucy.
And JT, what's your name today? Oh, Lord. Bedriggles. That's so JT makes up a name that's not JT every single time we film. So he is Bedriggles today over behind the camera.
Bedriggles the Micheless.
The Micheless. It's the D&D name. But we are also joined by Ryan Dunn today. Ryan, would you like to say hello to the people?
Hey, guys. So, yeah, thanks for having me. This is awesome.
Yeah, no, it's exciting. Me and Ryan were in the trenches of the Ghost Tour wars back in the day.
Not the wars.
Oh, there were wars. Let me tell you.
Yeah, so I first met Chris, I think, Savannah Theater.
Yeah,
we
that's
were
right.
filming there, me and my wife and our team, gosh, back in like 2011 maybe.
Yeah,
It's been
a while.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, we're really excited to have Ryan today. Next time, Ryan is on the show, he'll have his wife, Kim. She wasn't able to join us today, but we're really excited because Ryan's been in the ghost game for a while now, so we're excited to hear about his stories and his favorite ghost stories, as you will.
Absolutely.
Everybody's favorite segment. But Ryan, before we get into that, I do want to talk about your books that we have sitting here in front of us. For those of you watching on YouTube, we've got a couple of them right here. So, Ryan, you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, so I've got Savannah's Afterlife 1 and 2 out now with Schiffer Books on Amazon, and it's basically about all the cases me and my wife did in Savannah. And the new one, St. Augustine's Afterlife, comes out in October. They just sent me the printed copy like 2 days ago, so I'm
That's
excited
fantastic.
to see.
cool.
That's exciting. I'm going to peek inside.
Yeah, take it. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
they-
they hooked me up. It's the one copy, and they're like, "Oh, we got more coming in about 6 weeks," but they wanted to go ahead and send one just to show me what it was going to look like with the layout. So
Super
Fantastic. These are great books, by the way. I have the first Afterlife. I need to pick up the second one. But yeah, they're wonderful.
sweet. Okay, cool. Yeah, it's our biggest thing is factuality. Me and my wife years ago were doing investigations starting in 2010. And then we started taking some of the ghost tours to see about some new locations. Some of the stops they would go by were places we'd already researched. And the stories they were saying, we were like, yeah, this didn't happen. So that's how we got into doing tours. But our biggest thing is working with the Historic Society and talking about what really happened versus, urban legend.
Sure.
Which is fantastic because there are a lot of books on, Savannah or other haunted locations that there's some variation, which of course happens with ghost stories, but I appreciate historical accuracy, if you will. But now if people listening are interested in buying these books, where can they find them?
Yeah, so my wife also has a store, The Other Side, spiritshop.com, and that has all the books for sale. If they want any signed copies, we can ship them out anywhere. She also sells a lot of witch items and things like that.
Very cool.
So a lot of spiritual stuff. So we've got all kind. We're kind of all involved in the paranormal game, so it's fun.
Absolutely. That's awesome.
And you also host ghost hunts all around, right?
Yeah, so we'll
take
host
teams out and...
Yeah, so we just got back in June, or last month rather, from St. Albans Sanatorium up in Radford, Virginia, and that was wild. Couple of people heard a lady screaming, "Help me," in the hallway on location, and there was nobody screaming, "Help me." We're in the bowling alley. They come running down, and they're like, "Hey, is everybody okay?" And we're like, "Yeah, why?" And they're like, "We just heard somebody upstairs screaming, 'Help me.'" So, and almost everyone got sick. And as soon as we walked out to the front porch, we were fine. Right back in the building, everyone was feeling just awful. So
Wow.
I think the building itself was kind of
Sure.
radiating a lot of energy on all the investigators.
Right. Yeah, that's always the worst when that happens. That happened a little bit to some of us at the Waverly Hills Sanatorium. I know a few of
Yes,
us were just
absolutely.
feeling icky from it, but that also could have been because it's very dusty in there. But still,
Yeah, there's like the sense of oppression that can
Yeah.
because it causes a very specific type of sickness, queasiness maybe
Right.
is a better way to say it. An uneasiness that becomes physical, like a physicalized sense. And then when you get outside, it feels like you can breathe again. Feels like you can stand up straight because your muscles are all like.
And then as soon as we go right back in, it's back again. It's
Exactly.
Yeah, that to me is very reliable equipment. Your body is the best piece of ghost hunting equipment available. You heebie-jeebies, goosebumps, all those things that come physically. It's like don't dismiss them simply because there's nothing to regard like lights lighting up or twitches on a needle.
And that's a good point. We worked with Juwan Mass from Ghost Brothers back in October, and we did the Juliet Gordon-Low birthplace and the Telfair Museum. And he was even telling one of the kids, we did it for Make-A-Wish, and he was telling the little girl, he said, yeah, your best equipment's your body. So it's kind of cool. It's cool to hear from other people, too.
That's pretty accurate with the Ghost Brothers. They're big fans of the heebie-jeebie internal meter.
Yep.
Well, and that's an interesting thing, too. I always, the sidebar on the Ghost Brothers, because we're lucky enough to work with them regularly. Their ability to disarm a situation through humor and through keeping their spirit light really does help keep the hunt from becoming oppressive.
Yep.
We have noted because they generally investigate to a certain point in our investigation, and then they go. They leave, and it's like okay. And once they leave, that levity leaves too.
Yeah.
All that lightness that they bring to it, and it's like that's such a good protection from oppressive feelings and dark spiritual nature is to have a high morale and humor.
Yeah, I feel like they bring such a good energy to investigations and really fun. And they made it light for this kid because I brought my kids too for that one because she was about the same age.
Right.
And our kids are getting more involved in the family business now. So the
Fantastic.
younger one I
awesome.
think is thinking about taking over. So at some point.
Fantastic.
Wow. That's fantastic.
Yeah, she went on the battleship with us at the USS North Carolina in Wilmington back in November, and Rockstar stayed up all night. So
That's awesome.
yeah, she wanted to go to the sanatorium. I'm thinking, not yet,
Not yet.
But,
Work your way up. Work your way up.
But tough kids. So
That's awesome. Yeah. It's always nice when kids start to really lean into their interests, especially, in it being such a welcome environment with you and your wife. So that's awesome to hear.
And well, now they're like 16 and 18. So it's, they're out of a much older age. When
Right, and their analytical thinking is
yeah,
much
when we
stronger.
started this, they were like 2 and 4, so they stayed away from all of it.
Right. That's fair enough.
I would just bring out I have a little ghost trap from the 80s they play with from Ghostbusters and a little proton pack, and I'm like, here, you can ghost hunt with this, so.
That's awesome. So for those of you who are listening to this, we also are live streaming right now. And we have a few Parajunkies who are joining us. We've got EF Serenity, we've got Maggie, we've got Nikki. So hello, y'all, for those of you watching on the live stream right now. For those of you who are not familiar, we do live stream most of our episodes while we're filming for the Parajunkies. And while we're on that note, we do want to say how great it is to be a Parajunkie. Basically, what a Parajunkie is, if you are brand new here, that is what we call our fans who are over on our Patreon.
They named themselves.
They did.
We should. I would like to point that out. That they dubbed themselves Parajunkies.
They've really doubled down on it too. So, but yeah, it's a really fun community over on Patreon. We've got group chats for like every subgenre of paranormal you can imagine. We've got lots of exclusive content. They get live streams weekly at this point. A lot of Discord with us, but also fellow enthusiasts in the paranormal. And if you are kind of teetering on the edge of whether or not you want to join us on Patreon, you can do a free week and see how you like it and then go forward with it. It's probably the best way you can support this show. Because we mostly use all of that Patreon money to continue growing and building this set and sending us on trips and things of that nature. So if you want to support us in that way, we definitely appreciate it.
As long as we're talking, do you have a Patreon?
No.
Okay.
So I appreciate it. Thanks. So.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
No, you're
Did I
fine.
interrupt you?
Yeah, so we've actually talked about doing a YouTube channel or something of that nature because we've got so much material that we're sitting on, I guess, 14 years of case files.
Right.
So, and histories and stories, and that's part of what makes me write the books because I've got to put it somewhere. And
absolutely.
The tours, of course, cover some of our locations, but we've got so many, and the books are a great way to turn out, all the stories and all the research.
Oh, absolutely.
Exactly.
But
So-
yeah, we've got a whole wall in the office of just printed binded case files, and I think we're up to like 150 now. So
That's so cool.
go.
That's awesome. So I was going to start out by asking, I know this is a very loaded question because you investigate a lot of places, but if you had to pick one place that you've investigated that you would want to go back to, what would it be?
Oh, that's tough. I can think of a few places I don't want to go back to. I know
Fair
there's a couple
enough.
of
As a matter of fact, let's start there.
Yeah.
That sounds far more interesting.
Yeah.
But so I know we did Candler Hospital back when it was still abandoned, and this must have been 2011 or 12 before they SCAD renovated. And we had stuff come home with us from the hospital. And we ended up getting a photo down in one of the hallways of a woman looking through one of the doorways, and it looks like an old nurse. But a team we were working with out of Atlanta had something follow them home too. So we were both dealing with attachments. And it just felt evil. And we got down into the morgues and down into the tunnels. And
I've been in both, and some of the more interesting things is a lot of people don't realize that Candler building was an asylum for a while. It actually stopped being like a hospital that cared for people in the medical way and turned into a psychiatric building for a while. It was Georgia Regional's office, and at a time when mental health was a burgeoning industry,
Right.
Where there were still, it was like at the tail end of like lobotomy and into. So I've heard a lot of stories, and I've experienced what I experienced in the building seemed to be a giant bald man in a hospital gown, and by rumor they're like, oh yeah, there were a lot of patients that were loaned out to Oakland Island, oddly enough.
Because Milton Bradley.
Yeah, Milton Bradley.
He was lobotomized there. I mean, of course, he was still working at Bradley's, but I mean, he was functionable, but I mean, he was not the same, obviously, after
That's correct.
having a lobotomy, and that happened at Candler there. So
Wow.
Yeah, that was I want to say that was the prevailing story, was any place that would perform lobotomies, if you believe in the supernatural, the paranormal, that is a living death.
Yeah.
It's like, what does that do to the spirit when you think of a human being? And if you believe in ghosts, we tend to believe that when the body dies, the spirit is separated from the body. But what happens when you take the mind and limit it?
yeah.
It's like, does that spirit suddenly become detached from that physical form? And
he had
it's
it
such a
from-
good question.
It was from PTSD too.
It was.
from
He was
coming back
shell
from the war.
shocked.
Yeah,
from World
shell
War
shocked.
II.
Yeah.
And so that's what the treatment. It was awful. But I mean, just to think. And so I'd say that place, we went on a trip to Waverly, you mentioned earlier, and did Bobby Mackey's the following
All
night.
right. Oh God.
Well, now it's going.
That's a twofer right there.
Well, then the third night we did a Sedumsville Rectory, and
Oh my God.
yeah. So
and you all made it home, yes?
yeah,
Yeah.
so Bobby's I wouldn't want to go back to. Waverly was creepy, but
can't.
it was almost not welcoming, but it felt like very communal. Like you could tell that it was very a
Yes.
family type
Yeah.
location. Even though I mean it was still scary as heck, but Bobby's was just it felt almost evil. And we just did the prison in November at Moundsville, and that just felt wicked.
Yeah.
But of course, some of the rooms, one of the guys was like the leader of the Aryan Brotherhood. I mean, it was awful.
Oh,
I'm like,
God.
Yeah, it is.
Of course, it's one of the few places where provocation and you don't mind saying a few choice words towards the spirits there. We usually respect everyone, but
Well, those spirits are dealing in that mind space, right?
and these were like rapists, murderers,
exactly.
I mean, awful human beings. So just the energy in the place, it was just. It's good to check it off our list, but it's not a place where it's like, hey, let's keep going back here. Like
Right.
it was.
Would you say there was an instigating story in your life that set you on this path?
So when I was like 6, my parents are divorced, but I was at my dad's for the weekend. We're watching football on a Sunday, and he gets a call from my grandfather saying, your grandmother's not well. We're going to go to the hospital. And we didn't think anything of it. So on the way to the hospital, I started breaking down. I'm like, Dad, she's dead. And I was like 6 years old. My dad got kind of ticked off. He's like, what are you talking about? She's fine. We got to the hospital, and she died about the same time I'd said that. She had a heart attack, and we were both really close. I didn't think anything of it, but it always kind of creeped my dad out for like his whole life.
Sure.
Understandably.
But then a couple years later, we used to live in this 3-story townhouse, and me and my brother's bedrooms are side by side on the
And,
third floor.
where is this?
This is in Greensboro, North Carolina. And my brother calls me or wakes me up one morning on a Saturday and said, there's a really creepy old guy in our back courtyard area, and it's a fenced-in courtyard, so you had to open the fence to get in. And the best way I can describe him, thinking now, he looked like Mr. Burns. I mean, like little Kane,
Sure,
like
right,
little old
yeah.
guy. But he like looks up at us and points at us, and we're like, so we run and get my dad. We're back in the room in 2 minutes. The guy's nowhere to be seen. Now, the way our backyard sprawled, you could see inside everybody's fence. You could see the whole neighborhood. There's no way this little guy with a cane ran anywhere in that matter of time. So we don't know what we saw, but that kind of led me on the path to being, I guess, intrigued by it.
Sure.
But me and
That's
my wife,
enough.
we're both Tauruses, so we're stubborn as heck. So we got to kind of see it to believe it.
Right, of course.
Which I guess led us down the path to
Investigation.
Yeah.
Right.
And even to this day, I mean, I obviously believe I've seen too much, but I still question every single thing, whether it be an EVP or anything. I'm like, well, what could have been happening at that moment? Could it have been Candler? Actually, somebody's stomach growled that night, and we thought we had a demonic growl.
Oh, sure.
And somebody's like, oh, I didn't eat well, and it was my stomach. But
Right.
with good recorders, it comes through as
Oh yeah, and
So.
we were just speaking about how we've outpaced ourselves in a lot of recording equipment because a lot of people will talk about why aren't you getting this in 4K? Why aren't you getting this in this high? It's
Right.
because they've applied filters to these devices to actually weed out noise and weed out these things that spirits manipulate in their attempts to communicate. So we do lose something. So it's interesting when you start to deal with it. You're like you were talking about your Zoom recorder, which is so sensitive and yet full of all kinds of
The Zoom I love. Like I was playing in a dad band a few years ago, and we would record all of our practices because we'd write stuff and forget the next song what we were written. So we'd record it, and it sounded like really, I mean, almost studio quality.
Yeah.
Right. But when we use them on investigations, it's too much of that.
Yeah, you can hear things so far away and so bizarre and crystal clarity of certain things, and then it's dampening all the other sounds.
My go-to is still an Olympus. That's like a $30
Exactly.
Olympus,
Yes.
and I still have. We have like $300, $400, $500 recorders, and that $30 Olympus is still my best EVP recorder.
And I did spend the weekend talking to an expert in that field. And he kind of had to go through all of these devices, and one of the big ones was it's a lot of that analog transfer of files, because when you get it off of a card, even that process of putting it onto a SD card seems to create a compression or create because it's trying to maximize the use of the card, in which it gets rid of a lot of the spare sounds and spare things. So I'm fascinated by how much we apparently went through the tunnel of equipment.
Yep.
It's like there was a time when cameras could pick up things and sounds and stuff, but now we're having to go back to old camcorders if we want to get good footage of these things.
Right.
We have to go back to old even analog tape recording.
Kim
things.
bought a couple of those, that's old tape decks that you pop the cassettes in for like analog, and it's wild how you can get different stuff analog versus digital. But it sucks. I'm a huge horror movie fan, and I used to collect a bunch of 80s horror VHS stuff they'll never put on DVD.
Right.
But now VHS's shelf life is, like 30 years or so. So it's all turning to...
So it just melts.
Yeah, it's all turning to crap. So it's got this great collection. Cases look cool, but can't watch
Right.
it anymore. So.
That's fair. Yeah, even the TVs don't accept the output
Yep.
of your VCR.
So all you haters out there saying, why are ghost photos always taken on a potato? That's why.
You're far more likely to get something on a potato because, again, the artifacts that you find in cameras and the artifacts that you find in these recorders do seem to be connected to the kinds of things. It's like the spirit box that's going up and down the radio dial. It's not just like pulling words randomly from DJs and songs. It's creating a fuzz that is manipulatable and to your ear, not even necessarily something that you could capture in recording as much as it is something that you capture through the act of listening, which is the Estes method, why the Estes method became so popular.
Yep. And we've had some great success with that. Actually, at the Battleship recently, we got a name Leonard that came through, and we're in a room where 5 sailors died when the torpedo hit them, and Leonard Pone was one of the 5.
Wow.
So
That's
that was
amazing.
That's
Awesome.
fantastic.
Dude, that's incredible.
And that was super cool. So, but of course, I always like to question everything. I think investigative-wise is the best way to go about it because there's so many things that can not necessarily be paranormal. Too,
No, sure.
so.
Oh,
Absolutely.
yeah. Well, you should always have a healthy dose of realism,
Yeah.
because it's very easy when you're in an investigation to get carried away with,
is.
you know.
Yeah, you should always bring a skeptic with you.
Yeah.
If you can afford it.
Yeah.
If you can afford a
Yeah.
If you
skeptic.
can afford a skeptic, they come at reasonable rates. If you go down to Skeptics R Us, You can pick one up.
Skeptics are great because it really helps keep everybody
It
balanced.
does.
So,
Right.
Because then you also have to explain why you think it might be something more.
Right.
And oftentimes you don't verbalize. You're just like, I have a feeling. It's like, well, what does that mean?
Yep.
You know, what can you extrapolate from the feeling, and what can you extrapolate from this piece of evidence? Because it's a great conversation to have with a person who is bound by a logic that does not allow for it.
right.
Exactly.
But we did get away from speaking favorites.
Yeah,
So
One place which, oh God, we investigated at least 30 or 40 times, but Moon River, and they just recently closed.
yeah,
Right.
heartbreaking.
Super creepy. It's one of the only places I've ever had like negative physical contact. Something slapped a walkie-talkie out of my hand one night up on the fourth
Oh.
floor. But I guess because we did it so much, it kind of got attached
Sure,
to the
of course.
location too. So I wouldn't mind doing Moon River at least one more time for.
It would be
old time's
nice
sake.
to, open the doors for us
Yep,
who used to do this all the time. Yeah, I actually got to do an investigation Moon River before it was Moon River, in that weird period between what it was right before Moon River and Moon
Was
River.
Oglethorpe Brewery?
It was Oglethorpe or something
Brewing
like
Company.
that.
Yeah.
They had the pool table down there
Yeah.
and all that stuff, and that was a harrowing time. And I've actually had multiple harrowing experiences in there because we used to do tours.
Yeah,
They
we
would
did,
give us
yep.
the ability to go
Yep.
and do tours in there, and I've had several guests have very perplexing things happen to them in the course of the tour.
Just such a wild location.
It was a wild location, and it was one of those things where that ultra finished bottom floors and then the very raw upper floors.
Bizarre.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
a threshold. You could
Yeah.
you could really
You could feel it
sense
when you hit.
Yeah.
Right.
The higher you went up, the more you could feel it.
No.
So that's actually a place I think that would be very fascinating to take in analog type of equipment.
Absolutely.
Because for some reason, that basement particularly affects cameras so
Yep.
deeply that I'm like, I was just thinking while you were saying that, I'm like, oh, I wonder if we brought like actual like old fashioned cameras
Yeah,
and
film
let them
cameras
go.
or
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
like that, or just old video cameras, because the cheap cameras that they sell now are the high end cameras of 30 years ago,
Right.
20 years ago.
Yep.
So it's interesting because what we used to think were the hottest cameras you can get for a song now.
Yep.
And they do create, and for the horror film lover, they do create that eeriness, because
right.
it's like
The
this seems out of
vibe.
time. These images seem like I'm looking into the past.
Yep, it does. That's like one of my favorite. I was an '80s kid, so like my whole genre is like the really crappy '80s
Exactly,
movies.
yeah.
The
Right.
worse, the better. I mean,
Yeah.
they're so fun to watch.
They are, absolutely.
And then most of them had really great practical effects. So it'd be an awful
Well, the death of
storyline.
practical effects in the 80s, 90s it kind of altered how horror, because then there came a whole time when they were just so dependent on
CGI.
CGI, and I feel like we've come back. I feel like there's a lot more practical now than there was like 20 years ago.
I'm so glad I got accepted to Art Institute of Pittsburgh when I graduated in 1999. I was going to go for special effects and movie making, and thank God I
That's
didn't, because
Tom Savini's area, right?
As soon as that happened, is like everything went CGI.
It did.
So I would have been
Absolutely.
powerless
So
for.
I was a special effects artist in the films, and I was there when HD cameras really became big.
Right.
And a lot of people don't know this, but the special effect artists went through the grinder during that period, because the HD was picking up fingerprints on the makeup,
yep.
and like you're trying to blend that line.
Oh, wow.
And with a film camera, the camera softens a lot of things. You get in front of an HD camera and it's like, I see the feathering off the latex,
Yep.
and we're just like piling on latex on this people because we're so concerned with the fact that the HD camera was unforgiving.
Yep.
Right.
It's like watching The Fifth Element in its hyper HD form versus like just kind of a standard definition. When it gets to that ultra high, you can
Yeah,
see
you
the
can see
the
the-
appliances, and you're like, oh gosh, that was a multi-million-dollar.
Right.
It's wild how things have changed with the film industry. I'm glad they're bringing practical back. though,
Me too.
'cause It looks so
Absolutely.
much better.
It does look so much better, and you can tell when actors are looking at something that's present and not, a tennis ball at the end of
And
the
maybe a little
Right.
CGI to like clean up the edges or something.
Sure,
You know,
Yeah.
but
and CGI definitely has its place. It's a wonderful tool, but nothing really beats something spraying out ooze and getting on
Yeah.
a person. And
Oh, 1,000%.
yeah,
Yeah.
like
And
the
that-
old Evil Deads were awesome.
Oh,
for
Evil
that.
Dead.
exactly.
So
But bringing it back to the ghost hunts and whatnot. So outside of Savannah, have you had a experience that, was very profound in your investigations? Or I know you mentioned there are a few places where it just felt evil. Have you encountered any kind of more demonic or malevolent type entities?
Good question. So there's one case we don't talk about too much, me and Kim. I think I put it in my second book, but we call it the Haglund case because it was the family we helped. But it was a case that we had to get an exorcism on a house done.
Wow.
And it was done, the exorcism was done by the Cathedral of John the Baptist.
Oh, wow.
So their Vicar General, Father Furman, came out. And he came out and exorcised a house. And our preacher over at Wesley Monumental is the one that referred us over there.
Yep.
But there was 3 college students, there were SCAD students getting physically attacked, pinned down, scratches appearing all over their bodies. They were seeing shadow figures in their house.
Story. I remember when it was happening, yeah.
And even stuff was happening at our house at the time. Like, I remember Kim saying that, I think it was like, we used to have an old fireplace in this 1880s house, and we had like an incense burner in there, and incense just lit itself that had not been lit for weeks. Candles were lighting themselves. A lot of malevolent stuff in the house. It was like everybody attached to that case, it was affecting, even when we weren't in the house. So bad that I don't even think I put the physical address in the book.
Oh yeah, no,
Sure.
absolutely not.
I was like,
and that's the danger of stories is they become points of obsession, and that obsession is actually part of how that spreads.
Yeah,
because a lot of people don't understand that when you're getting into that demon field,
right?
There's so many stages, and it's not even just the presence of like a physical demon, a named demon, as much as it is the effect of a named demon being in the area.
Right.
It contaminates and it corrupts and it creates ill will around things, and it's like walking through tar. You'll take it home with you. It'll get all
You would
over
feel
your
it in the
stuff.
house. It was almost they'd already been through infestation and oppression, and the next stage would have been a possession.
Possession and subjugation.
And the girls were getting held down at night by these physical beings. They would see these shadow figures with hoods.
Right.
And so I think, and Father Furman thought the same thing, that maybe at some point we thought that it would try to get into one of them.
Absolutely.
But I was affecting Kim, affecting us, like just the whole household, like everybody involved. The father, probably the only case out of couple hundred we've done, we think might have been truly a demonic case.
Right.
I feel like the demonic,
And that's how rare it is. That is absolutely how rare it is.
because a lot of people use that term for anything bad. Like at the prison we were at, they'd be like, "Oh, it's demonic 'cause you got scratched." No, you're around a bunch of spirits of old prisoners. Like, it's,
Right.
you're gonna have
Well,
malevolent energies.
it does become a catch-all for evil or evil presence, and a lot of times it's just because we don't have the verbiage. You find yourself utilizing the term, because I will use demon and devil a lot, but I'm always quick to say, I'm using that to describe the intent or the feel. I'm not, I don't want it to be mistaken for diabolic obsession or those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's fascinating, and I do remember that case.
It was,
it was fascinating.
It was absolutely scary. And these kids were all like straight A students.
Yeah.
They didn't drink, they
Wow.
didn't party. So I mean, you've got these kids that just needed help. They didn't. I mean, it affected a lot of people, and that was almost surreal because we've got a Catholic priest showing up for an exorcism. So
Right.
it's like, thank God it wasn't on a person; it was on the
It was the
house. That
place,
would have
yeah.
taken a lot more approval.
Yes.
But just in general, and for it to be from the cathedral, I think that was pretty intense.
Were y'all able to figure out kind of where this came from? Like, was it attached to the house originally, or?
So very good question. That's what was weird. The house is built in '02. No history on the land or because it was a little further from, it's like Midtown, so it wasn't downtown. So no
Right.
like battleground history or anything
right,
like
right.
that. No deaths in the house. So we don't know what caused it. We think
gotta
maybe
be
somebody did something in the
Ouija
house.
board
Right.
And one
oriented,
of
or
the
that
students-
type of thing, because especially it's students that age range, they're so
Yeah.
susceptible, and it's easy to just socialize in a circle and not realize.
And they said they didn't, but we think maybe one of the students may have and been a little
think so.
Embarrassed too. Like, look, we just opened this door to hell, basically.
Exactly.
And, like,
Right.
Sorry,
And that's another thing is unintentionally accessing evil can be as simple as dark thoughts and ruminating thoughts and things like that seem harmless and certainly not ritualistic by any stretch of the imagination, but that doesn't mean that there's not an opportunistic spirit nearby who's like, oh, I see a door opening. All right.
And they were very susceptible because, see, all three of them were couple months shy of graduating. And the thing is, they lived in that house for 4 years, no activity. But all of a sudden, it ramps up. And
even more intriguing. Yeah.
right before it happened, there was a power surge in the neighborhood. Power's out for 15 minutes.
right.
Power comes back on, and they start having experiences. So I've wondered if the
That's
power surge
fascinating.
worked as like almost like a conduit.
Well,
or a
and
switch,
also
you know?
the notion that, and we talk about these kinds of entities a lot, which are like parasitic entities, that if they were there for a long time and the entity was feeding off of them and their end was coming, they were going to leave the house. The desperation of keeping them
Yep.
can drive that kind of force into action. No, it's a fascinating story. Certainly, when you start to like put it all together and be like, what are the things? Because like a power surge
That's fascinating.
is, and I've heard of this before, like in cases where like light bulbs explode and things like
Right.
that, and they're looking for the power surge and things like that because they think that a power surge could conceivably be the moment that something goes from the veil to our world, like the moment
Right.
of breaking through.
And that makes sense.
And so if you've got something that's like shadow dwelling, living with these young, vibrant, living people, and then they're close to when they're going to leave.
Right.
That's a big part of their emotional journey. That's a big part of their physical journey. And it's like, what does the animal do when the food source is about to leave?
Yep.
Probably tries to kill him.
It's kind of like our Voldemort case. It's like that case
sure,
that shouldn't
yeah.
be named or something.
Right,
you know?
right.
Everybody will, and it always happens because we don't usually talk about it. It'll just
Mm-hmm.
come up, but we'll be having a dinner party or something, and somebody's like, "Well, what about that?" And Kim's like, "Okay, here we go." Like, but
Yeah,
it's,
I
you know,
honestly, I think that's how I heard it. Was just like trickles of conversations.
because it's not that we won't talk about it. It was just such a, I guess, diabolical type of situation that it just
and you don't want to invite it,
right.
Yeah.
It was so uncomfortable that it was like, it was awful. And usually we love what we do for a living. It's one of those few times where we're like, this is,
Well, let's not forget that the ability to affect the physical world is so profound. So, like, if you can light a fire,
yeah.
no,
Right.
lighting a candle is only a step away from burning your house to the ground.
Yeah.
It's only a step away
Yeah.
from you waking up in flames. So, yeah, I would be very, very nervous about it.
Yes, I guess between that one, the Bobby Mackey's, and the prison, I'd say, and the Candler are probably the worst of the places we've been. But then there's places we've been, like the Battleship we did, and we couldn't wait to get back. Went back 6 months later and did it again. And still a lot of tragic history. It was the most decorated battleship
Right.
during World War
Yeah,
II,
Right.
but the spirits there weren't malevolent. It was sailors, it was community.
Well, and they were dedicated. They were
Right.
dedicated to each other, and they're dedicated to a cause, and that does change things. A lot of people get into their mind like battlefield ghosts and things like that. These were spirits that died in the process of trying to achieve something or trying
Right.
to do something. When you're given a mission, and we always talk about unfinished business
Yeah.
as being what a ghost is about. You take people who take their honor and their duty very seriously. You end their life in pursuit of that duty.
Yep.
They continue. And it's usually camaraderie. People get that. It's. I mean, there are of course jerks in every situation.
Sure. They're like,
So there are plenty of jerks out there who died and like are mad that they're dead. But I do think that people get the wrong impression of battlefield ghosts, because usually it's usually all residual. It's usually
Right.
all they keep doing what they did then.
Yep.
And they tend to band together. Which is like the problem with like a Gettysburg haunting,
Right.
because
Right.
now
Yeah,
you actually have two forces that are
Right, two
that are still
sides.
dedicated to not liking each other.
they're just irritated that they're like, oh, this is the longest
Forever,
battle.
this battle's still going.
Yeah, I think even the sanatorium we did last month is one of those places where, like, it was, we did it. It was very active, but it's not one where you're like, you want to keep coming back.
Right.
Like some people do, some don't. I think to each their own, but it was one of those check it off the bucket list type of places. too.
Right.
Absolutely. I
The
understand
area
that
around it was
fully.
beautiful. We're hiking waterfalls and everything, but the sanatorium itself, not so much.
Sure.
And my equilibrium was off the next day. Like I remember
interesting.
like walking like crooked and just last time that happened was in high school when I went to Ozfest, and the next day I was like, why am I walking funny? I was like, oh, because blowing my eardrums out
Right,
probably.
exactly.
But
Probably.
yeah, same thing. Like it was a weird feeling. So I don't know why
That's
it messed with my
interesting.
equilibrium. Like the whole day we were walking around and I'm like walking crooked. So
Is it in the hills? Is it in the mountains?
it is,
Kinda?
but I was
Not enough
fine
to
until
really-
after the investigation. The next morning, I guess. I felt like the building really affected a lot of
sure.
people there.
Yeah,
I
And it
believe that.
And then we later saw a Dead Files episode where Amy Allen's like, oh yeah, the spirits here are making everyone sick. I'm like, oh, great, that explains a lot. So-
Well, yeah,
It's like it's not just us.
and you've got the verification.
Yeah.
It's
Exactly.
like, oh, this is a known indicator of this building's hauntings.
But
Do you have any places coming up?
Right now we've got 2 restaurants we're working on here in Savannah. I can't say the name yet.
Yeah,
until
yeah,
we get
yeah,
to say,
totally.
but we've got a list of maybe 8 or 9 places in Savannah we haven't done,
Oh,
and we feel like
fantastic.
other than that we've covered like Pirates House,
of
Pink
course.
House. We've basically hit everywhere.
Yeah, all the
And,
major hitters.
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
after that, I think we'll be not done in Savannah, but we're trying to knock out those last few locations. I know we want to get into at some point the Gingerbread House,
Right.
And
very nice.
Owens
Yeah.
Thomas House. I'd like to do.
Of course.
They have-
Especially now that they've unearthed all that information about the slaves and started putting their names on the walls
Yeah.
and giving
Right.
credence to them. I wonder if there's more activity or if there's more,
and
something.
they were awesome with us doing Telfair. Of course, it was for Make a Wish, so I think they were more lenient
Oh,
because
sure.
of it being,
Absolutely.
and they were awesome. Them and Juliet Gordon Low Birthplace said we'd love to do it,
yeah.
and I'm like, wow, they never let. But of course, it was for a really good cause.
It's for a
so-
good cause,
and we
absolutely.
love doing those things. They're
Yeah, yeah.
fun.
That is really cool. The Owens Thomas House actually might be a really good one to bring a skeptic, a male skeptic specifically, to, because I've been getting recently a lot of guests who have gone to the Owens Thomas House, and after the tour, they, ask like, "Do you know anything about the Owens Thomas House?" And I'm like, "Yes, what? But what specifically?" And every single time, the common denominator is their non-believing husband has been having these profound experiences where they're getting super lightheaded, like feeling like they're having a heart attack, like all sorts of
interesting.
Oh, wow.
crazy things. And I've heard this probably 4 or 5 times in the past couple months.
That's very interesting.
So maybe if you have a skeptic willing to feel like they're having a heart attack, but that might be an interesting thing to play around with, just because I'm like, what a weird thing, because I don't know of anybody in their history who died of a heart attack specifically,
But it's got to
Not
be.
that I know
It's got to be
Yeah.
there, though. I
Yeah.
mean, when you get to a certain level of history with a building, and this is a frustration to ghost hunters and historians alike. People don't take every single thing and every single event and every single death
Yeah.
all that seriously. You might luck out with an obituary, but even that is digging and digging.
Depending
and
how
digging,
far
Right.
back you go.
depending
Yeah.
on how far back you go. Because these were everyday life events, and it wasn't something that you announced to the town crier. It wasn't something that even a lot of houses in Savannah have little burial plots in their courtyards.
Yep.
Yep.
and it's like, do we know for sure that was okay? That wasn't a murder?
Yep.
It's like, no.
Nope, it was-
Literally.
some child died. It's like, how?
Yep. Like Foley House,
Probably
they
s-
found the body in the
Yeah,
wall.
right, exactly.
In the 1980s. I
Probably
mean,
scarlet fever,
Yeah.
but probably hit in the head,
Yeah.
probably this or that. And so you hear these stories enough, you start to realize, oh, you know what? It's a crapshoot trying to find the story behind ghosts. Because I will tell you, years of research and years of going on ghost hunts, a lot of ghosts don't have stories. They don't have like the aha moment. It's just, I experienced this. It's like, well, who do you think it was? There's no telling. I could go back, and that's not even to say
Yeah.
that the ghost there originated there.
Or
It could
even
have been
died-
brought there by somebody else.
could have died on
Right.
the land before the place was
Exactly.
built.
Before it was
and-
built.
And it's not documented. I mean, and that's the frustrating thing. No matter how much we do the historic research, there's always loophole or missing pieces.
Right.
And one of my favorites I've seen on death certificates, you may have seen this, it's when people were really old. I've seen it 3 or 4 times in Savannah. Cause of death was called home to God.
Called
And
home.
I'm like,
I called home. They will actually put that on.
called home. It's like,
Yeah, I've seen that, and and it's like, what does that mean? And it's like, and generally they say it means old age.
Yeah, usually
it
they're like
means
70s, 80s. and you're like,
natural
yeah.
causes, but instead of saying natural causes, they're
called
like
home.
called home to God or called to heaven or
Teething's one I've seen for
Yeah.
children, like infants. And
Right.
of
Yeah.
course, we know teething doesn't cause death, but back then they thought that was the cause of death.
Right.
So.
Right.
Well, because teething is also oftentimes confused with colic.
Yep.
Like, why
Right.
is this child screaming? Oh, it's teething.
Yep.
It's like, well, it also might have stuffed lungs. It might
Yep.
have
Right. Yep.
pain in his chest.
Yep.
Yeah.
I actually went out to Bonaventure on Saturday, and I was noting, have y'all ever seen on graves where it says "asleep in Jesus"?
Yes.
No, I'll have to look for that.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's everywhere
Oh,
in
wow.
Bonaventure. Asleep in Jesus.
And weird turns of phrases because it's obviously a period at which that was the thing. Oh, that's such a sweet thing to say. I'm going to have that
Yep.
put on my tombstone. So, are you sure?
Well,
Right.
interestingly enough, I was researching recently as a case we did years ago, but McDonough's Pub, I could never find proof of the Julius Kooks committing
Right.
suicide.
Right.
And I couldn't get his death certificate because I think Vital Records started doing those around 1900, 1910 maybe.
Yeah.
And it's like 1860s this
Yes.
happened, or
Yeah.
70s. So it was his obituary. And my kids, I was telling them about it recently, and they're like, my God, they put that in his obituary. But the entire story of his whole suicide and his money
Wow.
problems and everything were in like a 2-page obituary in the paper.
They just laid
And
it
I'm
all
like,
out.
they just let it all, which helps
I want to
us
say
figure
that
out what
the
happened.
first time I
but
heard
Right.
that story, it was told to me as related from his obituary.
I was so
as
surprised they just
from
threw everything out there. Usually,
Yeah.
if somebody dies that way, they wouldn't put it, and not to mention add his money problems and the whole like like they. Put
I would say
everything
that the
in.
19th
Man.
century were ghouls.
Yeah,
They really wanted the details. And when you think of what is your entertainment really?
Yeah, the paper.
You know, where are you getting anything? And yeah, people are gossips. And I think that was probably one of the big things that got them, because they wrote explicit things a lot.
Yeah.
Because there is a great article about the Savannah Theater cops hearing the applause, or
right,
the music and the
yep.
applause from the side. And it's like, why would you write that in the paper? And
Yeah.
It's like, because there's nothing else. You know?
Nothing else
Right.
going on.
It's like,
Yep.
imagine
No TV, no-
no TV, no radio,
Exactly.
nothing, and you know, the newspaper man going, the cops did what?
Well,
It's like, well, they were called to the theater because they heard
and
music and
morbid
applause.
curiosity has always been a thing. It's it still is. I mean,
Oh, but they mastered it in the Victorian era.
Yes, they
They
did.
were like, this is my dead baby.
Yeah.
Take a picture.
And then it's
I'm
so
gonna wear
weird
his
state to
hair.
state.
I'm gonna
'cause
wear its hair. Oh my god.
Florida's really weird. We were doing a case years ago. I think it was Scarlett O'Hara's about George Coley and how he died. I wanted to get his death certificate. He died like nearly 180 years ago. And Vital Records sent me a kind letter and was like, okay, well, thank you, but we can't release this unless your immediate family. I'm like, this
How
is
immediate can 180?
right.
So it's just funny. They won't, Florida and in Savannah, if it's at least 50 or 60 years old, you can go get whatever you want.
Exactly. So,
Right.
yeah, there's and a general policy with archival anything is there's a shelf life.
Yep.
But I do have to. I guess it's regional or state by state or maybe even city by city.
Yeah,
Who
it could
knows?
even be.
Yeah.
Yep. So it's frustrating depending on where we go, what we're allowed access to. And then like Savannah, you can even get access to coroner inquests, which is amazing. So, I mean, those are, you really want to find out what happened. I mean, it's all laid out there. So.
Although I'm fascinated, I've read several coroner's reports that would have options, this or that.
Oh, wow.
They'd be
Oh.
like, this was a heart attack or a stroke, and I was like,
Right.
you can't tell.
can't
It's like,
decipher.
what was it? My favorites are like possible poisoning,
Yeah.
It's like, what?
and I'm like, but what's the other possibility? It's
Right.
like, so because there's a lot of. I think there was a time when, just through speculation, like poisoning, they would look at your liver. But if you're a heavy drinker, there are a lot of poisons that would probably replicate liver damage that you
Right.
would get from being a heavy drinker. And let's face it, we're in Savannah, so a lot of people are
Right.
probably heavy drinkers. So they look at their liver and they're like, well, he might have been poisoned. And it's like,
It's like you ever had
do we
a
have something
Chatham?
a little clearer?
Yeah.
It's like, can you run a test on that? It's like,
Or like something with the arsenic stuff was
Yeah.
untraceable. That's
Right.
how
Untraceable
the Blanche
poisons,
Taylor
yeah.
Moore in
That's right.
Burlington. My family used to go to church with her. My grandparents are from
Oh my
Burlington.
God.
True story. My granddad used to manage a grocery store and worked with one of her husbands. And Raymond something, I can't remember his last
Right.
name, but every time she'd bring him lunch, he'd get sick. And
sure enough, that's
Yeah, she was putting the arsenic- yeah, so-
yeah.
but he remembers that. And then later she got arrested. And he was like, "Oh, that makes sense." But
Wow.
So don't
Yeah.
eat lunch from her.
Yeah.
It's,
Well, and that's the classic. The women are poisoners.
yeah, I think she killed 3 or 4
Yeah,
at least
she
husbands.
did.
Maybe they ended
Absolutely.
up digging.
Yeah.
They exhumed a few bodies and found more from arsenic she was using. So
Yeah, if you know what you're looking for, because that's the trouble with arsenic. It's like when you say it's arsenic, it's like I know what to look for.
Right,
But,
but
if
when-
you don't know that it's arsenic, you don't know what you're looking
Yep.
for.
which, I mean, listen.
Oh, and we're not endorsing arsenic,
No.
by the way.
No, but there is plenty of times in history where a lot of women, felt like this was their option out to get. So
Again, we are not endorsing.
no, if you listen, if you're enjoying this segment of the conversation, go read a book called The Lost Apothecary. It is literally about
Yes.
a woman who dispenses poison to other women who want to kill their husbands. So
wow.
there you go. But again, not endorsing it. But
Not
it is
endorsing it.
But it is interesting. And it does come up a lot in Savannah ghost stories, like
Well,
with,
even when we went to the Lizzie Borden house, there's a lot of talk about the fact that the Bordens were all getting sick.
Yes.
And Lizzie was buying poison at the time from a local store. And they feel that Lizzie was trying to kill them through gradual poisoning. But, that takes a long time. So she was like, axe.
She's got that up.
Yeah,
Exactly.
You know what would work quicker than poison? Axe to the head.
Axe to the head. Swift. But even Lottie at the Forsyth Park Inn, that's
Famously,
like a major plot point of her story was that she poisoned her, what she thought was her aunt, but
It turned out to be her mother.
Exactly. Very messy situation. Probably should have just told her from the get-go. But she, same logic, was like, not going to axe to the head, but you know what'll take this woman out? Oleander in the tea.
Oleander in the tea. Yeah.
We got to investigate there a few years ago.
Yeah.
Super haunted.
Yes.
Very active, especially in the attic. They had a really creepy old antique
the rocking chair.
there.
Rocking
Yeah,
chair.
you remember the rocking?
Yeah. Yeah, it's
And people have such really solid experiences there.
Yeah.
It's one of the main places where people report seeing a woman like out in the backyard. And it's like, that's interesting because once you start to narrow down the ways people experience the spirit, because Lottie actually died as an old woman, but most people see a young, like almost teenage woman.
like a 16-year-old is roughly, because I think,
But that would have been when she lost her way.
yeah, she just kind of almost like split in that moment, you know?
Again, with the lobotomy concept. It's like there may be a moment in your life when the person you were does die.
Yeah, because she was sent to, we found records where she was sent to, I think, Bellevue or somewhere up in New York, but they wouldn't, when I contacted them, same thing, I wasn't immediate family, so they wouldn't give me any info on why she was put up there, so.
And she is said, I've always found, and she was interesting because there are reports of a bed and breakfast in Nova Scotia that her family used to go to in the summer.
Right.
And so during the summer months, they have Lottie showing up.
Yes,
But in
that's right. I've
Savannah
heard
in
that.
the winter, we get Lottie.
Yep.
And I think that's interesting. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's really interesting because there have been cases, only a few that I've studied, where ghosts have been at a couple locations. Same thing with Little Gracie. I think at Bonaventure, 'cause she's at the cemetery, but she's also where the hotel
Johnson
used to be.
Square,
Yeah,
right.
Johnson Square. So,
Well, and Abe Lincoln.
Right.
Abe Lincoln famously haunts his Springfield, Illinois, and the White House.
Right.
And it's like, so yeah, I think that the impression and the energy that you leave in a place can hold on to the essence of a person.
Right.
Right.
I think it's fascinating though, because there's only like a few. You only hear of a few of them. You know,
Yes,
it's very small.
absolutely.
You don't hear of it usually.
Yeah.
a lot,
Right.
Which is
Not,
cool.
and not a lot. Which then brings up things like haunted vehicles, boats, things that move. It's like, so the spirit is attached to the vehicle, like a train. Although I don't know any like ghosts on a train, but there must be.
There
must be stories of ghosts on train. If you know of a ghost on a train story, please send it in. I'd love to hear it because I'm now realizing I don't. I've even heard like ghosts on planes.
Really?
I have. A man who had a heart attack on a plane, and if you sit in his seat, people like get agitated by him. And that's kind of like the Twilight Zone stories that people tell. Very so narrowly focused, and they're like the plane would change hands from company to company so that nobody knows what plane it is anymore. But it's like sit in 14D and find out that kind of silliness. But the fact that story kind of lives, whereas because I've heard of ghost trains, like the hearing of the horn or seeing a light coming
or
when there
ghost
isn't a train,
cars,
or
but
ghost
not-
cars, but like people in cars or people in trains.
But who's conducting the ghost train?
Oh, ghost conductor.
I could see that. Like if, your whole life was like conducting this train or whatever, they might want to do that for the rest of eternity. I don't know.
They might identify so much with it.
Yeah.
That,
because we like to believe that a lot of spirits show up with the best moment of their life or their best time period, why they can show up as younger people, even though they were
the highest peaks of their emotional journey in life, which also, because it can be the joyous moment, but it can also be the darkest moments.
Right.
Which fascinates me to no end too.
Exactly.
Which a lot of them still in outfits from soldiers, and,
Exactly.
still at war. But like you said earlier, the dedication to that position, I think, is what holds them kind of in there too.
I wonder if we're seeing less ghosts because people are kind of over it.
Yeah.
They're kind of over being dedicated. Well,
I did notice at Moon River when they started, it's been a while, but when we were doing events there so much, and then a lot of other groups were too, that it was getting almost oversaturated, and we weren't getting as much activity. Right. I think they're just getting tired of.
And we talked about this before with other groups. It's like when you go to places that are overdone, the spirits don't need to make their presence known because people are paying attention. You know, it's a lot of times what a haunting seems to be is the spirit seeking recognition for their existence.
Right.
But if you have groups coming in every night saying, we're looking for you, they don't feel the need to, show themselves or interact. Why would they?
Yeah.
You show up and you're like, we know you're here. It's like, oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for acknowledging my existence. I don't need to, shake this or poke that or play with the Boo Bear. I can just sit here and soak in the company. So that's why I love going to places that are not heavily trafficked, that people don't go to with great regularity, because then you have the opportunity to discover things, ideally, that aren't, necessarily the focal point of the folklore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
EO Serenity said, have you guys seen that video of passengers coming off a plane through the ramp, but there's no plane
I
park?
have seen that.
That's I have not seen this video.
Yeah, it's somebody's at an airport and there's one of those things that hook up to the plane, and they're like videoing, and it's just like a stream of people walking by, and then they go over and there's no plane.
Oh wow!
And it's just like what?
Just
And it very well could have been they went down the wrong thing, turned around, and had to come back. But it was eerie enough. It's like, that's really strange.
But what if it was a plane that went missing?
Yeah.
And it was like these were the final moments.
Landed. Yeah, it finally landed. It finally came in. Better late than never.
Reminds me of the Titanic on Ghostbusters.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Yeah. It's such a good scene.
Yeah.
It
Welcome
really
to New
is.
York.
Welcome to New York. Yeah, that is an interesting one, though, EO Serenity. I'm going to have to go look for that video.
Yeah, look it up. It was viral, I want to say about a year ago.
Very nice.
Although I cannot tell what years are anymore. I've learned this, that I keep saying a year ago, and they're like, that was 2019, that's 5 years. Or I'll say a year ago, and they're like, that was 2020, that's 4 years ago.
That's happening with us because our kids are now almost
Oh,
adult.
right.
Well, one's an adult, but like we're like, oh no, that was a long time ago. Or ghost hunting now that we've been doing it, I guess 14 years. It's just time.
Yeah.
I can't believe the theater was 13 years ago.
Yeah, no,
Feels
that's
like
crazy.
3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah. It really does. Oof.
But
Yeah.
now, if you had to pick one place in your career, out of your lifetime, that you, on your bucket list, have to go to this place to investigate, what would that one be?
Oh, I'd have to pick somewhere. Give me a second. I had to pick somewhere that wouldn't allow people like, God, I'd say the Amityville house, honestly, because it's just it's a no go. It's nobody's ever going to be able to investigate there, as far as I know, since
Right.
they're friends.
Right.
Something like that, I think, because I'm going to go big if I'm going to go for somewhere,
Exactly.
and something to where they're like, they're never going to let people investigate. I think that would be awesome.
Yeah, I think I would really love to conduct a really thorough investigation of medieval castles. Some of the more remote castles.
That would be cool.
It would be amazing. But yeah, I think you're right. I think it's the places that are just barred.
Right,
that,
Right.
No one's going to let you in. It's kind of like saying, I want to go to Area 51.
Yeah,
I'd love to
yeah,
just
see,
walk around Area 51.
Yeah, let me investigate there.
And let me just look around. I don't
Who
want to
knows?
poke
Maybe
around.
one
something
day.
like that on Paveglia Island in Italy.
I
would be huge.
went.
I would love.
So I was, and I actually have some documents from there. But when I lived in Italy, we were, because it's right out of Venice in the canals,
Right.
And we were. It wasn't a gondola; it was like a boat, and we were going down, and he's like, "You guys want to see something scary?" And
Yeah.
he pulled us off, and we just circled it, and it was so dreadful feeling. You're just like, oh, and he's telling you, over 1 million people died of a plague here, and you're like, it's such a small island. Yes, their bodies were sacked up to the.
Yeah.
It's like, and more than likely, we got about 5% of the truth and 95% of this is freaky.
Right.
Because we're all kids. We're 11
Yeah.
years old. But yeah, I would love to set foot on that island.
Or
Absolutely.
Alcatraz. I don't know if they allow overnights.
I don't know. I would love to think they do. I just came.
It's crazy
went
that they
there.
wouldn't, because they
Yeah.
got tours during the day. They can maximize their money. And just
Absolutely,
rent
or
it
at least do
night.
special event kind of situations.
Right.
Like I went to the Winchester House the day after they had an overnight.
See, that would
And
be
I
a
was
good
like,
one.
oh, that would have been
Man.
amazing.
Yeah. Places like that for sure, because it's just off limits and it's so
Yeah.
iconic,
Yes, that's it.
which I probably regretted after I got into the Amityville house. But of course,
Sure.
it's just such an iconic story.
such an
and
iconic
it's
story.
something I grew up being scared as hell of. So
Right. And even that, because there's a lot of people who want to dismiss it because of the hoopla.
right,
Because obviously,
Yeah.
there's a large component of it that is made up.
Right.
But there's a root that is absolutely true, absolutely bloody, and terrifying.
Yep.
And it's like the reason why that story stuck and why it went so far was because the facts that they built their fiction on were sound and scary and full of ill intent and unpredictable intent that being there would give you, especially as a paranormal investigator, would give you enough energy, resources
especially
to come up with
the
something.
DeFeo murders plus the Lutz. Like that
Right.
guy was there 28 days and he lost a lot of money.
Oh yeah,
I mean, they basically lost everything.
yeah, everything.
And,
Well, and that's just it, desperation.
and he was a big
know,
dude. Like
yeah.
he didn't look like a guy that you would. He was like lumberjack looking, not a guy you'd run right out of a house. So,
Right.
That to me is just fascinating. Between the DeFeo and the Lutzes alone makes you. But of course, between the movies and now there's like Amityville in space or something.
Yeah.
I think I'm not kidding if there's an Amityville
I think there
Karen.
is,
I
yeah.
think there's an Amityville Karen movie.
Okay.
Like,
Oh
I'm not
my
kidding. Like,
God.
you should look it up. Like it was either that one or Children of the Corn I saw recently, and it was like Karen, and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. You
Right.
guys are really
Yeah,
out
you're
of
really
it.
pushing it.
No,
Yeah.
I could see Karens of the Corn. That
Karens of the corn.
That's like two of the horror series that they've just, I think, because they never really had rights to it, like they just let
Sure.
it go, so anybody can make an Amityville or Children of the Corn movie now. So
Well,
for
Children
some
of the
weird
Corn are
reason-
so innocuous. As long as you're not really stepping on Stephen King's toes. And here's a little lesson for you writers out there: you can't actually copyright the title of something. That is why George Lucas
That makes sense.
trademarked Star Wars. Star Wars is a trademark. You cannot use a trademark, but you can't copyright a title. So if you want to call your story The Sound of Music, you go right ahead. They didn't copyright the title. You can't copyright a title. But most people don't do it for fear of comparison. Why would you do it?
Right.
Why would you bring the
Right.
comparison upon you? But Children of the Corn is a great example.
now everybody
because-
just takes the name so they can
Right.
have it for recognition, and then they make a crappy movie.
and a lot of people actually started trademarking things that didn't even belong to them.
Yeah.
So they could sue you when you try to.
No,
It's the Shutterstock of names.
Now I'm just thinking of all the horror movies that could be Karenified.
Karenified. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Killer Karens from outer space.
Well, in the 90s, they put everybody
Texas
in space.
Chainsaw
I think
Karen.
there's like a leprechaun, a Jason. Like everybody went to space in the late 90s.
Yes,
Yes.
They're like,
yes.
okay, we're out of ideas. We're going to put them
Jason,
in space.
Leprechaun.
There's Hellraiser. There's a
Hellraiser in space. Absolutely.
I forgot the
no.
name of that one, but it was one of the ones.
I think it's just numbered. It's
Yep.
like Hellraiser 10 or
Yep.
Hellraiser or whatever.
Exactly. But yeah, I think the one place I'd really want to go to is Aokigahara.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Although there's a part of me that's also strangely reverent of the space, given its history of its present history. That
Right.
that it's an ongoing place where people take their lives at such an alarming rate. I guess what, Logan Paul, is that
Yeah.
who did it? When you take that as an example of, because this is a weird industry, ghost hunting, paranormal investigation, because there is a level, and we even felt it because we did an episode on Milton Bradley, but then we're like, his family's still around, and
That's how it
and
was
people
when I
who
read the
know
book.
him,
I had
and it's
to-
like we have to be mindful,
Right.
that. Because this gets ghoulish,
Yeah, it does.
and it's dangerous to show up at a place where there is fresh memories of horror and fresh memories of terror, and be like, let's do this. And so I'm desperate to go there, but I'm also like wary of capitalizing on it. It's like
There's a thin line about that.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
especially with like the Milton thing. Deanie let us investigate there, and he was very awesome to talk to us about things. But when
Love
we bring
Deanie,
up
yeah.
Milton, he would just get quiet. So we had to find most of that
Right.
research through court records and all the other things. Because Deanie, he would tell us anything we wanted to know about the family or anything. But when it came to, which is granted, he
Well, I
didn't
used to
wanna talk about
work
the murder.
with Deanie a lot when I was with City Lights Theater. We used to go there because it's such a wonderfully eclectic spot. So that it was like, hey, you wouldn't have to have an old cash register, or you wouldn't have. So we'd get props and things from there. And I had met Milton once or twice, and it's so fascinating, the history of that building, and how it's still there. You know, that is remarkable. That's 100 years of family presence in the downtown area that changed.
Yeah, they've been doing it since 1883, I think. And the building is like 1855, if I'm not mistaken. But the family, 1883, they've been locksmithing since.
That's amazing.
Wild.
And Deanie had opportunities to go elsewhere and do other things. Certainly his brothers and family members did. But the fact that he chose to maintain that locksmith, legacy, incredible. He was an incredible character, absolutely.
I think his nephew now runs the shop, if I'm not mistaken. But I know that his kids went, I think he said to dental school or something.
Yeah,
but
dental
I was
and lawyer. And
I just hated that at first it looked like it wasn't going to continue. So it's great that it's staying in the family. So I hope to God.
I hope to God that it doesn't.
It's just we're losing too many Savannah icons.
Well, yeah, there's hardly any left, and even the ones that are left are getting a shine that doesn't feel very Savannah-like.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. And, you're 1,000% right. It is a very thin line of, what do you say to, because it did happen, but it's like, you can talk about these things in a respectful manner.
Oh, absolutely.
You
Yeah,
know?
no. It's mostly that sensation of, oh, I don't want to be.
And that's why
Fair
we do
enough.
provocation, same
Yeah.
thing, because we don't want to go in there and just stir stuff up because the TV guys do it. It's
Right.
so rude to the people that are, if there are still spirits that are inhabiting the place. Except for, like I said, when we did the prison, because it was a little bit, we were dealing with different characters there.
Well,
but
and in many cases, you take an instance like going into a prison of violent criminals. The type of communication that they would have been most responsive to anyway. It is.
it's a different level of.
You're creating an error trigger or a trigger that is based upon how they interacted.
Right.
Not, it's like bringing a toy to a children's nursery to, kind of get a child's ghost to interact. You can't really show up at a place where aggression was the actual, standard operating procedure and expect anything but aggression to get response.
I wonder if you brought like a really good meal or something as an offering that would actually.
That's actually really, or cigarettes.
Yeah, cigarettes.
Like put a cigarette down.
Yep.
Like something that would have been like very valuable in
absolutely.
their existence.
A
Like
shiv.
Kim's probably the best on our team for that as far as like trigger objects and like associating what would have been at that period and bringing those things. We ended up leaving a doll, an antique doll, in one of the rooms where Rebecca at St. Albans supposedly killed her baby, or her baby died, and was a miscarriage, and she kept the dead baby in the wall, which turns out that part wasn't true, sadly. It's a great story, but when we asked them where they heard the story and we couldn't find it in history, they said, oh, we found out through investigations. And I'm like, well, through the ghosts? Because they could be lying to you.
They could be lying. And that's one of the things about a solid ghost story. And this is something that, versus like a paranormal investigation, a solid ghost story is about a departure from what you can prove.
Right.
If you prove a ghost story in the telling, you generally find yourself painting yourself into a corner. So you want enough of it to linger. This is like for dramatic emphasis, for the idea of telling a ghost story. And it's always a one-upmanship because it's bad enough to lose your child. It is. But if you one-up it with, she was so incensed by it that she wanted to keep the fetus, body, and so she put it in the wall. All of a sudden, you've got like a very macabre and dense and thick and disturbing story. It's like, no, losing a child's disturbing enough.
Honestly, the history of that place was disturbing enough.
Disturbing enough.
We're in the shock therapy room, and one of the scariest things they told us, and it was just common knowledge there, but if the patients weren't fed breakfast that morning, they knew they were getting shock therapy because they wouldn't want them to have the food on their stomach.
Exactly.
Right.
So, I couldn't imagine the horror of not getting fed breakfast and knowing what's coming for you. And then they had that waiting room where they all had to wait for their shock therapy and all. That was...
And that's an excellent point, is that emotional dread in a place, which is why hospitals oftentimes are so haunted, or hospices, is where people know it's coming, that death is coming, or that their pain is going to be prolonged. Dread is an amazingly powerful stain on an environment. And you go into these places, how many people do you know that are like, I hate hospitals, I hate going to hospitals? It's like, that's weird. because it's 9 times out of 10 you're going because your friend is hurt and will get better.
Yep.
But somehow going through the halls, you're like, oh, this
Yeah,
place. It's like, but it's also highly sanitized and it's very clean.
Yep.
So it's like, what exactly is it about the hospital? Well, it's dread. It's this pervading sensation and feeling that people who are in there are in pain. They anticipate pain. They think pain is coming. They fear death. They experience death. So there's all of these emotions, and I oftentimes will state that a lot of ghost activity is really just leftover emotion that was poured into a moment.
But so I think the question we have that we haven't covered is, what is the most important personal paranormal experience you've had?
Oh, that's tough. Probably, honestly, was when we moved to Savannah. 'Cause we moved here in 2010. Just like everybody else, we fell in love with the city and decided to move here. We'd come here on our honeymoon, and our kids are 2 and 4, so we moved before they were old enough to get into school. And that way we could cover that before we get them in the school system. But we moved into an 1888 row house about 2 blocks from Forsyth on West Bolton Street, and we were having strange activity in the house. And me and Kim have always been interested in creepy I mean, we love creepy stuff. You know, we're those type of people. But we've always been stubborn and kind of want to see it to believe it type of stuff. And our youngest, Madison, was 2, and this is just one of the many stories of the house, but she would set up her little tea set on her table for 2 people and have conversations, and we didn't think anything of it. And they went to my in-laws to visit, and I'm at the house by myself, and I cleaned up their room, put the tea set away. I go up later to put clothes away, and the tea set's set back up for 2 people. And then Addison later told us that she saw mean scary and nice scary was her way to describe it. She said mean scary would make mean faces at her, but nice scary would play with her. They were people she saw in her room. Wow. And then we found out kids had died in the house, and it was like, okay, this is cool. And then we were getting, we're like, I mean, not cool. It's just
That's a solid response.
It's
Okay,
pretty much
cool.
what got us doing. And then we tried to join a paranormal team, and it was like 2010. And at the time, all the teams I reached out to had split up. I think the Searchers were one without Cobb. They had just disbanded. So there's nobody doing it. And I'm like, why is nobody doing this? And me and Kim thought, let's start a team. And so the 2 of us started a team, and I think now we're one of the oldest still running. But it's like, it's one of those things too where people start a team and a few years later split up because it's expensive. It's very time consuming. It's a lot of work, and you don't get paid a lot for it. So we make money through tours. You know,
I had a team for a while in the 90s and a little in the early aughts, and generally what would happen is if you wanted to keep going, there's a certain amount of dedication. But I started getting calls at all hours, 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. I would get these calls and people, you know, asking questions and wanting me to come to their house or coming to their apartment, or, you know, I had to go to the O house so many times because you had these freaked out SCAD students who were like, you know, something's in my room, something's up, you know, something going on. And finally I was just like, I gotta stop, because there is no profit in showing up at a person's house at 3 o'clock in the morning to tell them they're okay. I mean, it feels good, but ultimately you're like, oh, geez, you know, I got to be at work at 8. And here I am. Or they'll drop off their scary stuff. They'll be like, I don't want this in my house. Well, what makes you think I want it in my house?
And then you get some of the strange calls. Like I had a lady the other week saying that her dryer was haunted, and that she switched to a top loader, and then now it's not haunted anymore. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, how's it haunted? She's like, oh, it won't turn off. And I'm thinking, you probably just have something going wrong with your dryer. But so we get a lot of those. But it's I think that's honestly the most interesting, because that house is what really sparked us to want to do it for a living. And then we were like, well, we can't make money just investigating, because we don't charge for that.
Right, exactly.
So that's how the tours came about, and now it's, you know, we get to do it full time. It's
That's
blossomed
fantastic.
into the business, the investigations, the tours, and then
Books.
Kim's got the books, and Kim's got her shop, and she's selling and making all kinds of cool
That's
witch
fantastic.
stuff. So
That's awesome.
And she just did a witch retreat, I think, or just last month too. So she's starting to do retreats where she does
That's
these
fantastic.
events. So cool stuff.
Do you want to push where to find all this stuff?
Yeah. So Kim's shop is theothersidespiritshop.com. My books are on there if anybody wants autographed copies. They're also on Amazon, barnesandnoble.com. The St. Augustine's Afterlife is already available for pre-order on Amazon.
Cool. Fantastic.
cool.
But that won't be out till October. So
And do you have any socials that you want to push, or
yeah, you can
your
find-
Afterlife Tours?
Yeah,
you
so
want to push
Afterlife
that?
Tours, yeah, probably push our business, of course.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Our website's afterlifetours.net. You can book for Charleston, Savannah, St. Augustine. We're in all 3 cities. Our biggest thing is all the places on our tour we've investigated, so we play evidence at each stop.
Right.
We tell the true history versus what versus what some people say. So you're getting real stories, creepy stuff, and get to hear some really cool EVPs. So makes for a fun tour.
That's awesome.
And you get to hear, instead of saying some say this, we're like, here's the person it happened to. This is the employee we interviewed. So we get a lot of really good firsthand accounts too.
Fantastic.
So
Super cool. Yeah, so if y'all ever make your way to Savannah, Charleston, St. Augustine, go take a tour with them. And thank you, Ryan, for joining us today.
Yeah.
Thanks for
and,
having
and
me.
please come back and keep us posted on upcoming adventures. We'd love to join you on a ghost hunt
Yeah.
sometime.
yeah, I'll definitely. And next time I'm bringing Kim because she's got to be here. She missed today, but she's gonna be excited to come hang out with you guys.
Fantastic.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Of course. And thank y'all so much for listening to today's episode. If you don't already follow us on social media, you can find us under Haunted City Podcast on every single platform out there. And with that, my name is Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Soucy.
And stay spooky, y'all.